In 2011, Joss Whedon and Drew Goddard came together to give us the horror masterpiece known as The Cabin in the Woods. The main goal of this film was to examine the common horror tropes in the most metatextual way. And you know what? The plot of this movie explains every other horror movie we've ever seen until now. So you bet this movie is full of several, and we mean several, Easter eggs and references. While the main villains of the movie were the Buckners, we did get a look at the complete horror roster on the ICONIC whiteboard. Some of them weren't used at all, and some were underused in our opinion, so in today's video, we will be looking at all the monsters on that whiteboard that hit the right horror spot. Before we get too deep into things though, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is a small click for you, but for us, it means a lot. Thank you. Let's begin. Alien Beast. Although we don't get to see this extraterrestrial beast in action, there's no denying that this creature is absolutely harrowing to watch. Its long, thin torso with the back hunched over already sends shivers down our spine, and not the good kind. Once you add those extra limbs hanging from the side and the pale covered eyes, this monster is absolute nightmare fuel. When its mouth is closed, it's smooth, but once it opens up, the mouth splits into 4 parts with sharp, pointy teeth on each of the patches. In the middle, there is this round, gaping hole that looks absolutely disgusting. The creative design of the aliens reminds us heavily of the aliens we saw in The Quiet Place, but it doesn't have legs. Of all the items we saw in the cellar, we don't know which one would have actually summoned it. However, if we had to guess, we'd put our money on one of those extraterrestrial artifacts we noticed in the background. The inspiration for this alien beast is pretty apparent, isn't it? It's probably an homage to the facehugger stage of the xenomorph species we were introduced to in the Alien franchise. H.R. Giger's design is so iconic that in this movie, the alien beast is actually referred to as a Giger-esque alien. Angry Molesting Tree. The name of this monster is definitely interesting, to say the least. This large leafless tree is rather slow-moving. However, that won't stop it from absolutely brutalizing its victims once it gets to them. From the name, it's pretty evident how it's going to, brutalize its victims, right? We don't need to get into that. In the cube, the tree looked pretty small, but once it was out of it, oh boy, it's absolutely massive. So we think the tree entity can control the size and mass of its entire being, just like it can control its branches to do its diabolical ensnaring and murdering. If we had to guess, we would say that any tree bark or tree sap in the cellar is probably related to this tree, so if you ever end up in there, you probably shouldn't touch any of those. The inspiration behind this monstrosity is, of course, the Evil Dead franchise. Both the original and the remake show a tree violently attacking and sexually abusing a woman who ends up becoming the first victim in a way. In the original movies, we did see the molesting tree eat or simply kill some of its victims too, so maybe despite its name, it does have a variety in its crime spree. Say what you want, both flora and fauna can be dangerous, and this is just one of the many man-eating plants that are out and about on the horror movie list. Yes, we are referring to The Ruins of 2008, which actually gave me literal nightmares. The Bride. When the digital analysis department voted on The Bride, she definitely ended up getting our attention. We sadly didn't know what the bride looks like, and she didn't show up in any of the Purge scenes or in the Cube scene. However, that doesn't mean we don't know what she's like to a degree. Based on context clues, we can guess that she looks like a young woman who is often seen wearing a white wedding dress, complete with a veil and everything. Now, given that she's in the facility, she's either possessed by a demon or is a demon of some sort. Maybe she was supposed to be sacrificed like Samara Weaving was supposed to be in Ready or Not. And because she did get sacrificed, the bride ended up getting powers and became this harrowing monster. There's also something just ghostly and spectral about a woman in her long, flowing white wedding dress, especially when you add the veil. Lots of horror scenes pay homage to that, but since we don't know anything about the bride per se, this is all just speculation, so feel free to add your own little twist to the mix if you want. We'd love to hear what you think of her in the comments down below. Jules almost summoned the bride when she put that beautiful gem necklace around her neck. However, Jules gets distracted by Dana reading Patience Buckner's diary instead. If we had to guess, we think this particular monster is referencing the bride trope from horror films. Bride of Chucky, Bride of Frankenstein, and the blood-splattered bride are just a few examples of this trope. We also have 1973's Bride, where the female antagonist doesn't have any supernatural powers. She's just a woman who was scorned. So this particular creature could very well be in reference to all of these movies, the trope, and the fear of commitment that a lot of people feel when they're about to tie the knot. Clowns! The electrical department came in clutch and bet on the clown. This humanoid monster looks exactly like you would imagine any clown to be. Pasty white skin with colorful makeup, a red nose, and colorful clothing topped with flaming red locks. Other than being straight up bulletproof, we have no idea about his abilities, so no one knows why he's held in the facility. If we had to guess, we would say he's probably a super dangerous dude and it's just safer to keep him inside. His weapon of choice is a large knife, which we see him use on one of the employees of the facility. He even attacked a female security guard later, which was definitely triggered by fear of clowns. Out of all the items in the cellar, the fortune-telling machine we see in the corner is his calling card. From the comments we saw Hadley make in the movie, it seems like the clown rarely ever gets called upon. And with that as a calling card, we can see why he doesn't get called upon often. The idea of the clown in the movie definitely came from the very real fear, coulrophobia, fear of clowns. This is also a classic horror trope that we've seen used in movies, comics, and books. From the Joker to Pennywise the Dancing Clown, they all play on that. On top of that, thanks to John Wayne Gacy, this trope got even more solidified. Deadites! This is the most obvious reference of the entire monster roster in the film. Inspired by the Evil Dead franchise, these Deadites were the one that the story department put their money on. These super powerful and extremely angry humanoid creatures are the reanimated and rotting corpses of loved ones. The ones we see in Cabin in the Woods are very similar to the ones we see in the Evil Dead franchise, so it's safe to assume that the same rules apply. In the Evil Dead franchise, we know that the Deadites are the bodies of humans who have been possessed and reanimated by evil spirits. The longer the evil spirits linger, the more rotten and pale the human body looks. Given how vast the Evil Dead franchise is, there could be several ways the Deadites could have been called upon in this movie. The group could have read from the Necronomicon, they could have messed with the items of the deceased, or they could have unintentionally performed a ritual. The possibilities are endless. However, between you and I think they would have gone with the Necronomicon reading if they had wanted the Deadites in this movie, because the references lean more towards the 2013 remake of Evil Dead. Demons! Although we see the names of demons on the whiteboard, we don't get to see them in the movie. Luckily for us, we get to see the demons' character design in the visual companion for the film. Here we see the demons and the Dismemberment goblins have extremely similar features, so based on that, we can actually say that maybe the demons too will have the terrifying features we saw from the goblins. However, the description keys that actually point out the differences between the two kinds of creatures aren't available. Given that we've seen demons mentioned in several religions and mythologies across the globe, there is a huge range of possibilities on how these demons would react. Just like that, it could very well be that no specific demons were chosen, and this name was added to the whiteboard to refer to the trope instead. Well, it hasn't been confirmed what their object for summoning is. If we had to guess, we would say some occult book or item used in satanic rituals. Now, when we look at all the horror films around us that lean into demons as their villains, you'll notice that there are three kinds of evil demons. We have the ancient beings of Earth who were long forgotten but now are waking up to bring hell, like Cthulhu. We have another type that directly references some mythology like Pazuzu or Baal, and the last kind of demon is created after an evil human being dies, like Freddy Krueger. Dismemberment goblins. In this movie, we get to feast our eyes on the Dismemberment goblins, which are these two humanoid creatures that may be small in size, but are extremely strong. The red goblin has a stereotypical demonic look with bat-like wings. The other goblin, green in color, might not be as tall as the red one, but it still manages to be absolutely brutal. These two creatures prefer killing their victims limb by limb, creating as much pain as possible while they laugh maniacally. It seems like both of these goblins are actually not in the same cube prisons that we saw all the other monsters in. They seem to be kept separate. However, somehow, when the purge started, they too were released together. They are seen many times in the behind-the-scenes footage for the purge, and with how excited the cast and crew seem to be while talking about them, it's strange that we didn't get to see a lot more of them. The Dismemberment goblins are clearly inspired by the goblins of Labyrinth and the Gremlins franchise, even though when we consider looks, they appear more like creeps, hobgoblins, or trolls. The Doctors! The accounting department decided to be a bit more experimental with their bet and placed their money on the Doctors. These two humanoid monsters, probably men, are dressed in white surgical suits. They have the whole gear down, from the masks to the caps. However, if you look a little closely, you'll notice that their caps are stitched into their severely burnt skin. Their uniforms are completely blood-splattered, and in their medical bags, they carry extremely crude medical apparatus, which they obviously use to kill off their victims. It seems like the taller doctor is actually the assistant of the other. If we had to guess, we'd say there's some surgical or medical equipment in the cellar that could act as a trigger for these doctors. If not that, then much like the bride, it's their surgical garment that acts as their summoning object. This is the play on the evil doctor trope we've seen so much in horror films over so many years. From classics like Dr. Frankenstein and Dr. Jekyll to more modern horror surgeons like the one we saw in Human Centipede and The Dead Pit, the horror genre has definitely cashed in on the evil doctor trope and may have given rise to the very real latrophobia, the clinical fear of medical procedures and doctors. Dolls! The kitchen staff decided to place their money on the dolls, and we got to admit, they were right to do that. The dolls are certainly quite the terrifying group of monsters. This four-person group, with 2 men and 2 women, are recognizable from their white, expressionless masks and their calm and collected demeanor while they stalk their victims during the otherwise chaotic purge. In the cellar scene, you can see one of their masks in the background, which could be what calls to them. It reminded us a lot of the villains from the 2008 movie The Strangers. Do you think there are similarities between the dolls and the strangers? Let us know down below. Dragon Bat! The large demonic bat-dragon hybrid truly stole the show for us. It has red scales and a dark body, which creates the most horrifying contrast. It looks like it's bathed in blood all of the time. The dragon bat has a mouth that can open into 3 parts, making it look even scarier. With its sense of smell, sheer animalistic rage, and tendencies, you feel like this is one of the strongest monsters in the entire facility. With its ear-piercing screech and incredibly high movement speed, this dragon bat creature is the stuff nightmares are made of. With no concrete evidence, we would say the thing that summons the dragon bat is either a dragon scale or a tooth, or maybe some sort of bat-related thing. This monster reminds us a lot about the main monster we see in Stephen King's short story titled Graveyard Shift. While this could have been the main inspiration for the dragon bat, we also feel like this creature acts as a nod to the hybrid animal monsters we see in movies like Dino Croc or Sharktopus. The closest mythological reference we can find to the dragon bat would be the Aztec Mayan god Camazotz, who was associated with human sacrifice and nighttime and was responsible for guarding the underworld. However, this is just a stab in the dark for one of the weirdest monsters in the entire facility. So what do you guys think is the main inspiration behind the dragon bat? Giant! Clearly inspired by the traditional folklore description of the giant, this giant is an elderly male with long hair and ashen skin. His beard and hair seem unkempt and matted, giving him an almost troll-like appearance. His clothes are pretty simple, almost friendly at first, but the club in his hand certainly makes him rather unapproachable. His natural size and strength are what make the giant the threat in this movie. There's also a female giant in the movie, but whether they're related or not is unknown. The item in the cellar related to the giant also hasn't been confirmed, but if we were to take some creative liberty and assume, we would think that some oversized clothes or some item he uses would be what summons him. Even though this giant did not make the final cut of the movie, in the earlier versions of the script, his role was rather evident. He was supposed to be the one to grab onto a security guard from the opening lift door and drag them in instead of the angry molesting tree. Giant snake! Internal logistics decided their best bet would be the giant snake, and we're not gonna lie, we totally see where they're coming from. The giant snake has the characteristics of several snakes in one mega snake. We can see the king cobra, anaconda, python, rattlesnake, and even the gaboon viper traits in them. All of these serpents we mentioned are extremely dangerous, and despite its massive size, the giant snake actually moves a lot faster than you'd expect, which makes it one of the greatest threats in the facility. Anything remotely snake-related in the cellar could be this creature's calling card. Anything from discarded snake skin to a snake skeleton, old snake eggs from when it was much smaller, maybe snake venom or a fang, all of them are on the table. Almost all mythologies around the world, including folklore, have serpents mentioned in them. Some forms of dragons, sea serpents, or cosmic beings are shaped like a giant serpent. Snakes are also often seen in horror and science fiction movies because of their alien appearance. The venom also adds to the fear factor. The Anaconda franchise catapulted the entire trope of giant snakes into cinema and also heightened cases of ophidiophobia, clinical fear of snakes. Hell Lord. Better known as Fornicus, the Lord of Bondage and Pain, this creature is a direct reference to Clive Barker's Hellraiser franchise. This tall, muscular man with circular saw blades embedded in his skull, latex gear, and arms covered in barbed wire truly embodies the whole aesthetic and fear that made the Cenobites so popular. He also has his male and female Lord minions when he's out of his encasement. Just like the Cenobites from Hellraiser, Helllord also has a puzzle box that needs to be solved before he can be summoned. We see him hold his puzzle sphere, and we're pretty sure you'll be able to spot it in the background in the cellar. Clearly inspired from Pinhead and his minions, Fornicus and his minions probably have the same set of powers the Cenobites do, so it makes sense why Gary Sitterson decided to place his bets on this man right here. The Huron. The Huron looks like a Native American man with dark brown hair and cloth wrapped around his waist. While very little is known about him, it's evident that he's from colonial American times. He uses a Bowie knife on screen, but we're sure he uses other weapons as well. Now, from the looks of it, he doesn't appear to be a supernatural entity. So why is he in the facility, you might ask? Well, if we had to guess, it might be because of how young he looks. His longevity could be something magic related, which would imply that he has a lot more traits and abilities that we have no idea about. In the visual companion, it was shown that the Huron can be summoned by banging on his tribal drum. The inspiration behind this character was from the fear early North American colonists felt when they first came to America. They had this irrational fear of the savage Native Americans. From the director's commentary, it could be that the Huron is referring to Magua from The Last of the Mohicans, or maybe the Scalpers from the Cormac McCarthy novel Blood Meridian. The Huron could also be based on the myth surrounding cursed Indian burial grounds, which have been used as a trope quite a few times in horror movies. Jack-o'-lantern. Portrayed by an unknown actor, the jack-o'-lantern is one of the monsters we see in the facility. This seems to be a full-grown adult man with a large pumpkin for a head. This pumpkin is carved into a horrifying face with a nightmarish grin and sharp teeth. In the Purge scene, we find out that the jack-o'-lantern can actually breathe fire, which is absolutely wicked. Given the clothes that we see this monster wearing, it seems like he's been around since the 17th or 18th century, making him a long-lasting nemesis. That's probably why the security force decided to bet on this monster. To summon him, you have to use the hollow pumpkin decorations kept in the cabin, as shown in the visual companion. Other than being the classic symbol of Halloween, this character could have been inspired by several ghostly folklore stories that are told during Halloween. He could very well be referencing the legend of Sleepy Hollow, written by Washington Irving, where the Headless Horseman was said to have a jack-o'-lantern for his head. Or he could be referencing the original legend from Ireland, where jack-o'-lantern is supposed to be a spirit rejected from hell and heaven, cursed to wander the earth aimlessly. Kevin. Not much is known about Kevin. He's supposed to be this normal adult man who can easily blend into crowds with his non-threatening demeanor. However, this is exactly why he's such a huge threat and is kept in the facility. He can easily lure his victims with him and kill them off. While that makes him sound like a fairly average serial killer, Kevin is actually a lot worse than that. Some theories claim that he's someone suffering from some uncontrollable mental illness, making him extremely dangerous, while others suggest that he has some supernatural abilities. Overall, everyone can agree on the fact that Kevin is the most mysterious entity out of all of the monsters we see in the facility, and to us, that makes him one of the scariest. Nothing has been confirmed, but fans believe that the tape in the cellar is the summoning card for Kevin. The film's director explicitly mentioned that he created Kevin because of the titular main character in the film and novel We Need to Talk About Kevin. The psychopathic and sadistic tendencies portrayed by Kevin in the movie, even though he looked like any other kid out there, are what makes this character so harrowing. Merman. Steve Hadley's favorite monster is the Merman. Played by Richard Creighton, this is a half-man, half-fish monster with a lot of sharp teeth, flabby blue skin, and fins on the back. It seems to be a mix of fish and human DNA. Gary Sitterson talked about the merman's tendency to attack the victim with its teeth and blow out their blood using the blowhole at the back of its head. Even though it's technically an aquatic species, the merman can survive on land, but given its bulky nature, can only attack and at best incapacitate victims. The merman's summoning chip is the conch shell that we saw Kurt almost blow into. The creature was probably inspired by the creature from the Black Lagoon or the horror classic known as Frankenfish. Since merfolk have been around in a lot of mythologies in general, fans believe that this particular merman is probably inspired by the marrows we see mentioned in Irish folklore. Mummy! The psychology department decided to bet their money on a classic Universal monster, and this mummy is definitely up there. Covered head to toe in long bandages, this is a reanimated corpse with some bloodstains on the bandages for spooky effect. We're pretty sure one of the embalming tools used on the mummy was there in the cabin, which would have summoned him. In the behind-the-scenes footage, we see him with a dagger, so that dagger could have also called upon him. Mummies have been around for many years, with the earliest mummy in fiction being The Mummy, or A Tale of the 22nd Century, a novel written by Jane C. Loudon in 1827. With Universal and Hammer Productions' portrayal of the mummy, we think it's safe to assume that this is one of the more common monsters in the monster flick, which would explain the reference in the film. Mutants. These heavily disfigured humans, who are clearly suffering from some kind of virus or infection, are known as the mutants. They have radiation scars or chemical burns all over them, which makes us think that they're part of an experiment gone wrong. Despite their behavior being quite similar to the zombies, the mutants don't eat their victims. Instead, they vomit this green bile on their faces, which probably turns them into mutants too. In the cellar, there's a creepy-looking gas mask. If our group had played with it, they would have summoned the mutants instead of the Buckners. Perhaps this summoning item is what led the demolition team to place their bets on these monsters. Given the way these monsters look, we believe they're a reference to the inbred and feral mutated humans from The Hills Have Eyes, Wrong Turn, and Chernobyl Diaries. But the whole spitting bile into others' mouths reminds us of Slither, where the slug-controlled undead would use their corrosive spit on their victims. The Reanimated. The administration team bet on the Reanimated, 2 living corpses who were brought back to life using either black magic or some scientific experiment. Their bodies bear crude stitch marks and their heads are sewn upside down. Despite that, they can easily climb up walls and ceilings, making them extremely scary to look at. As for their summoning chip, we think anything related to the deceased that these 2 human males were created from, or perhaps some sort of voodoo doll found in the cellar, would do the trick. The Reanimated pair is a direct reference rather than a tribute to the Reanimator written by H.P. Lovecraft. However, when it comes to their behavior, we would say that they remind us the most of Regan McNeil. The behind-the-scenes footage gave us a few more scenes with the Reanimated, which you should definitely check out if you find them interesting. Reptilius. This reptilian humanoid creature with green skin, long arms and legs, and a tail with armor on it is absolutely diabolical. Its face structure is similar to a gecko, but it has 2 long horns sticking out from the side of its face, which look absolutely bizarre. The horns next to the face remind us of the creatures we saw in the species. However, truthfully, the most popular reptilian humanoid creature in the horror genre is the creature from the Black Lagoon. What summons Reptilius is unknown, and honestly, we can say we don't want to find out. Sasquatch/Wendigo/Yeti. This large humanoid creature, covered in fur with large feet and hands, is almost 7 to 8 feet tall. It's easy to spot given its height, but it's very deadly when encountered. We have no clue how the facility managed to capture one of them, given all the legends regarding them, which describe Sasquatches as being extremely fast and stealthy, especially when it comes to avoiding humans. The inspiration for the Sasquatch we see in action is the Bigfoot and the Yeti we've all heard about. Many horror films, serious or spoof, have used these monsters over and over again. The abominable Snowman of 1957 from the Hammer Films production probably is the most popular of them all. According to Drew Goddard, if they wanted to summon the Sasquatch, there was a bottle of Eau de Sasquatch cologne in the cellar that could have done the trick. It sounds silly, but think about it. Wouldn't you mess around with a bottle that had that label? The Scarecrow Folk. These Scarecrow Folks are undead people dressed in raggedy clothes with sacks on their heads that seem to be stitched into their skin, and of course they were bet upon by the DNA Archives Department. We could see bits and pieces of straw sticking out of their faces, which makes them look like an ordinary scarecrow that you would find in a farm. We see 3 possibilities for summoning them. In the cellar, there's a pitchfork, a haystack, and even a scarecrow that might be capable of doing the deed. These creatures are undead and unstoppable, and even a grenade blast seems to do nothing to them. They're probably inspired by one of several scarecrow horror movies like Night of the Scarecrow, Scarecrow Gone Wild. Sexy witches. While they're not seen in the film, we can assume that these witches are simply more seductive than the normal witches. The Archives Department put their money on them, and we gotta say, sexy witches definitely have what it takes to kill off young people, as we saw with our group. We think a love potion or some piece of women's clothing would probably be their calling card. Sarah Sanderson from Hocus Pocus, Angelique Bouchard from Dark Shadows, Samantha Stevens from Bewitched, and Tara McClay from Buffy the Vampire Slayer are a few of the many sexy witches we've seen over the years. Snowman. Going purely off the name, we're pretty sure this Snowman monster is based off the film titled Jack Frost. We believe this creature would look like a typical snowman with several abilities that allow him to stay alive, be practically indestructible, and wreak chilling havoc wherever it goes. While the Snowman villain is cool, we feel like it would be difficult for him to show up in the cabin given the temperature difference between the snowman and the cabin. If the communications department had won the lottery and the snowman showed up, we think the facility would have had to manipulate the weather in that place to get the snowman moving. Or perhaps the chilling monster does that itself. The item that summons the snowman is unknown, but we have a feeling it's probably a snow globe or maybe a carrot. Sugar Plum Fairy. Phoebe Galvin became my sleep paralysis demon with her portrayal of the Sugar Plum Fairy, better known as the Ballerina Dentata. She's a young ballerina with a face full of teeth, just teeth actually, and we think she's a manifestation of a child's nightmare and not so much a result of a horrid experiment. She was almost summoned by Holden when he ended up playing her music box. If the music box had finished its song, the ballerina would have shown up in the cabin. While this isn't confirmed, we genuinely believe that the Sugar Plum Fairy is a tribute to Black Swan. The horrifying psychological pressure that ballet dancers have to go through for the sake of perfection is definitely something worth referencing, but the Sugar Plum Fairy could also be a version of the Tooth Fairy, as we saw in Hellboy 2, The Golden Army. Twins! Twins have been a very common horror trope in the past century of horror movies, so it makes sense that Joss Whedon would refer to them in this film. The two young girls dressed in matching white dresses, long socks, pink shoes, and blonde hair are absolutely terrifying. They move like one unit, and even though they have no weapons on them, it's evident that they have some sort of supernatural power that they can use to create chaos wherever they go. Their summoning object seems to be the identical pair of bears that Dana notices the moment she steps foot into the cellar. They're clearly a tribute to the Grady girls from Stephen King's The Shining, which Stanley Kubrick took up a notch in his 1980 classic film. Unicorn. Since they're usually considered a sign of purity, seeing the unicorn on this list definitely surprised us. The engineering department also bet on it, which made us wonder how violent it could be. Well, as it turns out, it's really violent. This white horse with one sharp horn is absolutely majestic to watch. We have no idea how the facility managed to capture it, but we're pretty sure that because they captured it, the unicorn is now as cagey and dangerous as any trapped animal. In the cellar, we see a unicorn tapestry in the background, which we're willing to bet acts as the unicorn's calling card. We genuinely weren't expecting the unicorn to take part in the purge, but we were equal parts horrified and delighted when we saw it plunge its horn straight into one employee's guts. Vampires! We think it would have been hilarious if the facility vampires were the Cullens, or at least sparkly vampires like the Cullens. However, instead, we got a more humanish version of Count Orlok. Throughout the movie, we see only one male vampire who's seen hypnotizing employees during the purge. Vampires are one of the oldest and scariest creatures that the horror genre has been cashing in on for a long time now, so it makes sense that the distribution department decided to bet on them. While we don't know which item would call upon them, we have the feeling it would be either an amulet or maybe a stake. Vampire and Bram Stoker's Dracula are two famous examples of how these creatures of the night go all out on humans, but if we had to guess the main inspiration for this guy, we gotta go with Nosferatu, and maybe a little bit of Kurt Barlow from Salem's Lot. Werewolf! If we're talking about Team Edward, we also have to talk about Team Jacob. That's right, folks, we're talking about werewolves. This was the bet of the finance department, who should be pretty good with their money. The lycanthrope is part wolf, part human, and all parts angry and bloodthirsty. Usually, the transformation happens after being bitten by a werewolf or when exposed to the moonlight on a full moon night. Once the transformation is complete, the werewolf becomes feral and has barely any recollection of the chaos when they transform back into their human self the next morning. This werewolf is 7 to 8 feet tall, completely covered in muscles and fur, and is a huge threat to our group. The human self is not seen during the movie, so this werewolf is always angry. The item that summons this creature is probably a silver bullet, but nothing's been confirmed. The addition of this creature into the roster was inevitable because of its entwined relationship with vampires. Its popularity in mythology and folklore, and the huge fan following werewolves have owing to movies. Witches! Only one witch shows up in the movie, but believe us when we say she's enough. Dressed in black, this old hag with all the stereotypical witchy features is absolutely bewildering to watch. She has magical abilities, can cast spells, and flies around the facility, stealing people's souls. Owing to her magical abilities, it wouldn't surprise us if she could control her mortality using her magic, or perhaps by stealing souls. We believe that she would be summoned had the group stumbled across her belongings, such as a broomstick, a book of shadow magic, or maybe even a big old cauldron. While the concept of witches may not be as scary as the other monsters we've seen on this list, there's no denying the effect witches had on us when we were children. The witch shown in Hansel and Gretel has struck fear in all of our hearts. This version of the witch seems to be the most similar to the evil queen from Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, especially in her hag form. Wraiths. These ghostly specters are kind of like the mist. They never show their face, and when they do, it appears as a skull. They are angry spirits that are trapped on Earth. They attack and destroy anyone in their path, either by supernatural abilities or by possessing them. In the movie, however, the Wraith we see seems more panicked and confused than angry. It could be that the personality of the deceased remains captured in their Wraith form as well. The word Wraith comes from the Scottish dialectical word which translates to spirit. So, to be honest, this Wraith is just a common ghost, and it would probably be summoned by its ashes or other belongings. Zombie Redneck Torture Family. The Buckner family wasn't the group of monsters that Sitterson or Hadley thought would be chosen. However, the maintenance department and Ronald the intern ended up winning the bet when Dana read Patience Buckner's diary in the cellar. The Buckners were a group of sadistic rednecks who really enjoyed killing and torturing people who stepped onto their land. They've killed off everyone they've ever faced off against, so they are a notorious unit amongst the facility monsters. Despite being absolutely rotten and undead humans, they have senses that normal zombies don't. Their love for sadism also shows whenever they kill people, which is why they are categorized differently. Each of the members of the Buckner family is kept separate because it's assumed that they performed sadistic stuff on each other as well. They're almost identical to the very real-life killers known as the Bloody Benders, who killed several people off between 1871 and 73 in Labette County, Kansas. In the movie, the Buckners managed to kill off Jules, Holden, and the director. Zombies. Last on our list is the zombies bet on by the chemical department. Unlike the Buckners, Deadites, and the reanimated, these zombies were affected by a virus, so they wear pretty normal clothes, which sets them apart from the other undead hordes. They always travel in groups, which makes it easier for them to overwhelm their victims. The inspiration clearly stems from Haitian and Caribbean folklore, where the reanimation of corpses happened due to voodoo. Over the years, the idea of zombies has changed a little, creating their own spin on the origin. From Resident Evil to The Walking Dead and 28 Days Later, zombies are one of the most common monsters in the horror genre, and this movie would have been incomplete without them. Marvelous verdict! With that, guys, we come to the end of our list. Drew Goddard and Joss Whedon really blew the minds of every horror fan out there with their innovative and super meta film. We absolutely adore how this film picks apart every single trope that you're accustomed to in the horror genre as a whole and makes fun of it in a believable way. Ever since this movie came out, whenever we watch another horror film, we keep imagining how the movie would be explained away by the cabin in the woods lore. We're sure we're not alone on that one, right, guys? Out of all the monsters, we really think it would have been interesting if we got to see the Sugar Plum Fairy as the main antagonist of the film, but what do you guys think? Do you think redneck torture zombies was the right choice for the movie, or is there another monster you would have liked to see as the main antagonist? Let us know your thoughts in the comments down below, and we'll see you guys next time. Thanks for watching, stay safe out there, and have a marvelous day.